Hey guys, what's up? It's PoopJ here with Damn Gamers, and today I feel like reading some Sonic fan fiction to you guys. Um, this shit is not written by me at all. It's written by some guy who was clearly very horny when he wrote the story. So, this story is called Shadouge, Their Secret Kiss. So it's like Shadouge is like Shadow and Rogue put together. So, I'm already fairly aroused, so let's read this story. Shadow was lying on the bed in his room. He had been there for several hours now, just staring at the ceiling as if it would provide him with a hidden truth to a never-ending question. Eventually, he got fed up inside before turning on his side, attempting to fall asleep. He couldn't, however, for indeed, a certain question kept plaguing his mind, and he had to admit it was slightly driving him crazy. A part of him really wanted to know, as he never heard it before, or at least he didn't think he had. He couldn't remember. The other part of him wanted to ignore it, as if it was never spoken of. But it was. He couldn't forget it. He wanted to know. What was it exactly? And why couldn't he let it go? Shadow? The hedgehog's ears perked. His room was dark, but the somewhat bright moon from the outside just brought him just enough light for him to see his partner in crime, Rouge the Bat, standing in the doorway. She seemed concerned about something. No doubt it was about him being in his room for so long without coming out to get anything to eat. And even the ultimate life form needs to eat to keep up his strength. Is it okay if I come in? Shadow nodded, and the Bat walked in and sat next to him on the bed. She placed a hand on the side of his head, checking his temperature. He seemed perfectly normal. You don't have a fever or anything? Is everything alright? Shadow sighed again. I'm fine. Rouge's ears fell slightly as she looked down at her friend. You don't sound fine. Not having to see her expression, Shadow could tell that she was indeed worried about him. And he didn't want her to worry, especially not about him. He sighed once more before turning to his previous position on his back to face her, but his eyes averted back to the ceiling. His hands rested on his chest. When he didn't say anything, Rouge spoke up. Is something bothering you? Hesitating, Shadow opened his mouth. No words came out, so he closed it. Rouge saw his uncertainty. Her ears fell completely to her skull. She sat on the bed next to him, grabbing one of his hands, and held it securely in her palm. Shadow, you know you can tell me anything, right? Shadow thought about it for a second, then nodded. Of course he knew. If anything vexed him, he could always go straight to her. She had told him this thousands of times, that her words were practically embedded in his head. But never having actually done it before, he felt quite uneasy. And with this specific topic, he didn't even know where to begin. Nonetheless, how to. But if he really wanted to know, then he'd have to take a chance, no matter how idiotic it made him sound. Rouge bit her lip, knowing good and well that she could not force him to let her know what was on his mind. She just wished he'd open up a little more than he has already, which was honestly hardly anything. Giving his hand one last assuring squeeze, she rose up from the bed. The Bat was about to leave him to his thinking, when suddenly he called out to her. Rouge! He began, but paused as if he were still searching for the correct way to ask this. Although not having the best of luck, he continued anyway, now looking at her. What exactly is a kiss? Rouge, who seemed rather surprised that something as simple as a kiss had piqued the hedgehog's interest, looking down at him and blinked. And for once, she felt perplexed on the subject as well, especially since she wasn't the best at explaining these sort of things, at least not verbally. But that didn't mean she couldn't try. Well, Shadow, kissing is pretty much the way people share affection for one another. It could be for a love interest,
or just a friendly gesture to greet someone. At least, the latter is what they do in France anyway. But basically, it's just a simple expression.
Shadow nodded, showing he clearly understood the information he had acquired. But he still had his doubts about what he actually felt like. To know what such an affection was and share it with another. Even he didn't see them as a possible love interest attraction, whoever they were. Though she knew her little explanation was quite forward, Rouge still managed to get the hint that he didn't quite comprehend it. Smirking, she decided it was time for Plan B. One thing Rouge always knew was that if you can't get him to understand him verbally, then physically might be the second best. She hopped back on the bed and sat next to him.
Sit up.
Shadow raised an eye ridge, but nonetheless complied and sat up, crossing his arms. His back now rested on the pillow underneath him.
Now close your eyes.
He did that as well.
And pucker your lips a little.
Shadow's eyes opened.
What?
Rouge stifled a giggle.
Pucker your lips,
she said again, giving him a little demonstration. Shadow blinked.
Why?
Because I'm going to show you. After all, experience is the best teacher. Shadow, not really knowing what she meant, nodded, closing his eyes and puckering his lips. Rouge could have gone into an uncomfortable laughter fit at how he looked, but didn't. She was pleased with the fact that he actually let her do this to him. And she had to admit, from her angle, he wasn't that bad looking. The bat scooted closer to him, and instantly her familiar scent filled his nose. She positioned herself right in front of him and puckered her lips a little, closing her eyes, and with a deep breath, she leaned forward. Their lips met. She had kissed him. Shadow's eyes flew open in surprise, only for him to close them back. He felt a sensation travel through his entire being. Could it be the feeling of affection he so greatly desired? Of course, he didn't know, but sort of figured it was. He couldn't explain exactly what he was feeling, but it was warm. He liked it. He wanted it to last, but he knew it couldn't. Rouge, on the other hand, was dumbfounded when he hadn't pulled away, but more so when she felt him return it unknowingly. She felt herself blush. Did that mean she liked it? Was it wrong that she found it somewhat enjoyable? She opened her eyes. He was blushing too, whether he knew it or not. Did he like it also? The two parted. Shadow opened his eyes. The kiss had ended, but the feeling was still there. His face felt warm. What did that mean? And did Rouge feel what he felt? He looked at Rouge, and she looked back. Their eyes danced together in the moonlight. It seemed to have grown brighter than it had been before. They were lost in one another. Both wanted the moment to last forever. However, it could not. They were just best friends after all. Nothing more. They both knew. But could they be more than just friends? Perhaps. Both began in unison, unsure of what just happened between them. They weren't supposed to like it, yet they did. Though slightly confused, Rouge, still blushing, gave him a heart-filled smile, and for once, he returned it with one of his own. His blush hadn't gone away. The bat then realized how close she actually was to him, and withdrew herself from him. Getting out of the bed and headed towards the doorway, Shadow's ears drooped at her sudden actions, but rose when he noticed she stopped halfway and turned back.
Shadow? Why did you want to know what a kiss was?
Shadow looked down at himself before answering.
The other day, when Sonic and I were racing, he mentioned it to me. I don't know if he was trying to throw me off course by it, but somehow we ended up getting into an in-depth conversation about it. He asked me if I ever had kissed anyone, and I said I never had. Or at least, I didn't think I had. He said that I didn't know what I was missing. I guess I was just curious to what he meant was all.
Shadow began hanging around Sonic, or more likely the other way around, and learned to cope with him a little better than they had when they first met. It was on the account that he had made a promise to Rouge that he had never associated himself with the Sonic gang, though he'd admit they weren't that bad as he thought, just sometimes annoying. But bypassing that, he realized that he could learn a thing or two from them, and yes, even from Sonic. Rouge nodded understandingly. With a hand on her hip, she narrowed her eyes as a thought came to her.
And let me guess, he told you that he kissed many girls in his lifetime?
Yes, Shadow nodded. He then titled his head.
How did you know?
The bat turned from him, crossing her arms and closing her eyes.
'Cause I know how much Sonic likes to show off, and I guaranteed he hasn't kissed a girl in ages, if any at all. Why did you say that?
Rouge turned her head his way, smirking.
The way Amy chases that hedgehog with the hammer of hers, I'm pretty sure she still has him wrapped around her finger.
Shadow thought about it. He nodded, knowing fully well Rouge was right. Amy wouldn't even let a girl come within 20 feet of Sonic, especially if she knew their motive.
If I were you, Shadow, I wouldn't believe everything Sonic says. He likes to boast, and when he boasts, he's liable to exaggerate a bit.
Rouge perceived. Shadow chuckled lowly to himself and nodded once more. Rouge then continued, heading towards the door.
Rouge.
She stopped again.
Yeah?
You won't tell the others about what happened here, will you?
Of course not, Shadow.
She waved her hand nonchalantly, followed by a wink.
It'll just be our secret.
Good. I won't either. He said, making himself more comfortable on the bed. Silence fell over them until another thought entered Shadow's mind.
What about a French kiss?
Rouge blushed harder than ever.
I think that's enough questions for one night, Shadow.
She then hurried out of there before things got a little too weird for her. But not before wishing him good night. Shadow, on the other hand, knew exactly what he was trying to do. And he was sure Rouge had caught him on it too. But unfortunately, it didn't work like he thought it would. Oh well. He smirked and turned over on his side again. He had done it. He had gotten what he so greatly desired, a kiss. The affection. He had gotten a hold of them, felt them, he knew them, and he swore to never forget them. Closing his eyes, Shadow smiled, and for once in a long time, he slipped into a slumber. But not before making mental note to properly thank Sonic for giving him the great idea of what they now call a secret kiss. The end. Alright, so I hope you guys got a massive erection and/or got extremely wet by me reading that story. I'm sorry if there were a few fuck-ups here and there, guys. I have the reading level of a 3rd grader, so please forgive me. But honestly, I was aroused the whole entire time. I hope you were aroused. Boners for all.